It was one of those hot mid-morning days in rural Georgia, the kind where the air itself felt heavy and the asphalt shimmered like glass. A lone woman, Tanya Brooks, stood at Pump 3 outside a small-town gas station, her old silver sedan coughing through its last few drops of fuel. Inside the glass booth, the clerk shook his head. Cards declined again. Tanya pressed her lips together, trying to stay calm. Run it one more time, please. Her voice carried the soft exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting quiet battles for too long. Two kids waited in the back seat, their faces pressed to the window, watching her. Across the lot, a line of motorcycles rumbled in, 12 Hells Angels, leather vests gleaming under the sun, engines growling like thunder. They parked in a row, dust rising around them. Everyone at the station turned to look. Tanya instinctively reached for her purse and lowered her eyes. This wasn't a sight you ignored in small-town Georgia. But when one of the bikers stepped off his Harley, a tall man with weathered skin, a grey beard, and eyes that carried both calm and storm, she noticed him watching the clerk argue with her. The man walked closer. His vest read, "Cooper, Road Captain." "You short?" he asked simply. Tanya blinked, unsure. "Excuse me." He nodded at her pump. "You're trying to fill up, right? Looks like you're a few bucks shy." She hesitated, pride warring with need. "It's fine. I'll just get enough to make it home." Without another word, Cooper pulled a folded 20 from his vest and handed it to the clerk. "Fill her up." Tanya looked stunned. "You don't have to." "I know," he said, walking back to his bike. "But sometimes, we do things anyway." Her tank filled. She thanked him 3 times, voice trembling. But when she looked back, the Hells Angels were already gone, just the faint echo of engines fading down the highway. She stood by her car, wind rustling her hair, wondering why a stranger like that would help her. What she didn't know was that Cooper's kindness had started something none of them could have predicted. Because by tomorrow afternoon, her quiet street would be filled with the rumble of engines, and an entire brotherhood of bikers standing at her door. The next morning broke bright and windless. Tanya was folding laundry on the porch when a sound rolled across the quiet neighborhood, deep, rhythmic, unmistakable. The rumble grew louder until coffee cups rattled on tables. Her son, Caleb, ran to the window. "Mama, there's bikes. Lots of 'em." She stepped outside, shielding her eyes against the sun. One after another, chrome beasts turned onto her street, Harleys gleaming, patches flashing red and white. Not just 1 or 2. Dozens. The neighbors froze. Curtains twitched. A delivery man dropped his clipboard and backed away. At the front of the pack rode Cooper, the grey-bearded biker from the gas station. He cut the engine and the others followed, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Tanya's pulse raced. What on earth? Cooper dismounted, pulling off his helmet. "Morning, he said, voice steady. "Hope we're not causing a stir." You could say that," Tanya stammered. "Why are you here?" He smiled slightly. "You helped one of ours yesterday." Her brow furrowed. "Helped? I didn't. You're the one who paid for my gas." Cooper nodded. "That's what I mean. You didn't have to thank me. But you did something more. You made me remember why we started riding together in the first place." The other bikers removed their helmets, nodding quietly in agreement. A few carried brown paper bags. One held a crate of groceries, another a box of toys. "We took a little drive through town," Cooper said. "Figured your family might be needing a bit more than a full tank." Tanya's throat tightened. "How did you even know where I live?" He chuckled. "You left your church sticker on the back window. Small world. One of our guys works the same mechanic shop next to it. Word travels fast when it's good news." The neighbors began edging closer now, curiosity outweighing fear. Cooper turned to them. "We ain't here for trouble. Just returning a little grace that someone showed us." Tanya's youngest, Maya, tugged her hand. "Mama, they brought food." "Yes, baby," Tanya whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Cooper placed the grocery crate on the porch. "You see, most folks look at us and see trouble. You looked at me and saw a person. That kind of thing doesn't happen much anymore. Tanya couldn't speak, she only nodded. Then Cooper glanced down the street, where engines still idled. We'll be around today, got a few more stops to make. Folks around here could use a reminder that kindness still rides. He slipped his helmet back on, but before he turned away, he looked at her one last time. Thank you for paying for my gas yesterday. You filled more than a tank. The bikes roared to life again, engines echoing through the town like a hymn of thunder and gratitude. As the sound faded, Tanya stood on her porch, surrounded by her children, groceries at her feet, her heart pounding with disbelief and wonder. Tomorrow, the story would spread far beyond her street, because the day the Hells Angels came to her door, they didn't bring fear, they brought hope on two wheels. By noon, the story had already taken on a life of its own. Someone had filmed the moment the bikers rolled up, 40 engines purring in unison outside Tanya's modest house, grocery bags stacked like an offering on her porch. By lunchtime, the clip had crossed town lines, landing on social feeds, whispered in cafes, and replayed in the local diner like breaking news. At the grocery store, folks were talking. You see that woman on Elm Street, a cashier said. The angels came for her. Must be some kind of payback. Others weren't so kind. Careful who you get mixed up with, muttered a man by the newspaper rack. They ain't exactly the Salvation Army. Tanya felt the stares when she went to pick up bread that afternoon. She smiled politely, but inside she was uneasy. Not because of the bikers, but because kindness, somehow, was being twisted into suspicion. When she got home, 2 news vans were parked outside her fence. Reporters with microphones waited like vultures. Miss Brooks, can you tell us why the Hells Angels came to your house today? One shouted. Tanya kept her voice steady. They came to say thank you. That's all. Before she could say more, a familiar rumble rose again from down the road. Cooper's bike. He pulled up beside her gate, cutting the engine, his eyes scanning the crowd. Media, her, he said under his breath, offering a half-smile. They won't leave, Tanya sighed. They want a story. They'll get one if we let 'em, Cooper said, then turned to the reporters. You want a quote? Fine. Write this down. He pulled off his sunglasses. This woman saw a man in a cut and didn't see a criminal, she saw a human being. She gave me dignity, and we gave it back. That's it. That's all it ever was. The reporters looked disappointed. It wasn't scandal, it was decency. They packed up soon after, engines whining as they left the way they came. Tanya looked at Cooper. You didn't have to do that. He shrugged. You didn't have to help me yesterday either. She smiled faintly. Seems we're even now. Cooper didn't answer right away. He looked past her house toward the horizon, where the heat shimmered off the road. His tone softened. Even's not what I'm after, There's a reason your kindness hit me the way it did. A reason I came back. Tanya frowned. What reason? He hesitated, eyes shadowed under the brim of his helmet. Let's just say, there was someone, a long time ago, who once helped me the same way. Someone who looked a lot like you. Before she could ask more, his phone buzzed. He looked down, then back up. I gotta run. Club business. But I'll come by tomorrow, there's something I want to show you. And with that, he started his bike again and rolled away, leaving a trail of dust and questions behind. Tanya stood watching him disappear down the road, her heart beating faster. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just a story about a tank of gas. Something deeper was unfolding, and somehow, she was part of it. The next day dawned clear and bright, the kind of southern morning that smelled like dew and dust and coffee brewing in open windows. Tanya was sweeping her porch when she heard that familiar low growl again, one motorcycle this time, not dozens. Cooper pulled up slow, cutting the engine before the noise could carry. He nodded in greeting. Didn't wake the kids, did I? Tanya smiled faintly. No, they're at school. I was just about to make some sweet tea. You drink tea, or only gas fumes? He chuckled and followed her up the steps. They sat at her little porch table, condensation sliding down the sides of their glasses. For a few minutes, Neither spoke. Then Cooper reached into his vest and pulled out a worn photograph. It showed a woman, dark-skinned, kind-eyed, with a toddler on her hip. They were standing beside an old Harley, both smiling like the world was wide open. "That's my wife," Cooper said quietly. "Her name was Denise. We had a daughter, April. Lost them both 15 years ago. Drunk driver." Tanya's hand froze halfway to her glass. "I'm so sorry," she murmured. He nodded. "It was a long time ago. I went off the rails after that. The club, they kept me alive, but I wasn't really living. Then yesterday, when I saw you at that gas station," he paused, voice rough. "You looked just like her. Not in the face, maybe, but in the way you held yourself. Strong, but tired. Proud, even when the world tries to take that from you." Tanya blinked back tears. "And that's why you came back?" "Part of it," he said. "I figured maybe the universe was trying to tell me something. That not every good thing's gone. That maybe, when you get a second chance to be decent, you take it." They sat in silence a moment, cicadas humming in the trees. Then Cooper smiled, small but real. "Your kids, Caleb and Maya, they remind me of April. That spark. That light." Tanya looked down, hands twisting her napkin. "You didn't have to bring all those men. It caused a scene." "Yeah," he said, grinning. "We're not exactly subtle. But that's how we show respect. When one of ours gets reminded what real kindness looks like, we show up. Because people remember the noise. We make sure they remember the good kind." She laughed softly through the ache in her throat. "You sure did that." Cooper stood, tucking the photo back into his vest. "I'll stop by again next week. The boys want to help fix that porch of yours before it gives out. You okay with that?" Tanya smiled. "I guess I don't really have a choice, do I?" He shrugged, heading for his bike. "Not when family's involved, The engine roared to life, and for a moment, Tanya thought she saw Denise's face flicker in her mind, smiling in sunlight, proud of the man Cooper had become. As he rode off down the road, Tanya stood barefoot on her porch, tea glass in hand, and whispered to herself, "Guess some roads really do lead back to hope." Within a week, the story that had started with one tank of gas had become something larger than Tanya or Cooper could have guessed. Every morning the low thunder of bikes could be heard somewhere in town, not as a warning but as a comfort. The Iron Shields stopped to help a stranded farmer fix his truck, hauled groceries for the elderly, and painted a fence around the elementary school playground. People watched from porches at first, wary. Then a few waved. Then one Saturday, Pastor Reggie from the local church stood up after the sermon and said, "Maybe we judged a book by its leather cover." The congregation laughed, and for the first time, nobody whispered biker gang. They said those riders. Tanya felt the shift most at the diner. When she walked in, folks didn't stare anymore, they smiled. "You're the lady from the video," a waitress said, sliding her a slice of pie on the house. "You showed this town a little faith still goes a long way." That afternoon, a dozen bikers parked in front of her house again, not to shock but to build. They tore up the rotting boards of her porch and replaced them, whistling to country radio. Caleb handed nails. Maya brought lemonade. When the last board was laid, Cooper leaned against his Harley, wiping sweat from his brow. "Looks better than new," he said. Tanya nodded, blinking back tears. "It's not just the porch. The whole town feels different." He smiled. "Sometimes all folks need is to see one good thing catch fire. You struck the match." She laughed. "All I did was pay for your gas." "And I paid it forward," he said, starting the engine. "That's how the road works. You give, it keeps moving." As the bikes pulled away, kids from the block ran after them, cheering. The same neighbors who once hid behind curtains now waved from their lawns. That night, Tanya sat on the new porch, lights glowing soft around her, and listened to the fading echo of engines under the stars. The sound didn't scare her anymore, it made her feel safe, like a promise written in the air. She realized something quietly powerful. One act of kindness had changed the rhythm of an entire town. 2 weeks later, the sky over Cedar Ridge turned an angry shade of gray. By noon, thunder rolled in waves across the valley, and the radio warned of a severe storm, winds up to 80 miles per hour. The old power lines that stitched the town together trembled under the gusts. Tanya was closing the diner early when she saw something that made her heart race. Across the street, an oak tree had split and crashed onto a small blue house. It was Mrs. Donnelly's, the retired schoolteacher who lived alone. Smoke curled from a snapped wire sparking on her front lawn. Without thinking, Tanya grabbed her phone and called 911. Then she called the only number she trusted beyond that, Cooper's. Within 15 minutes, she heard it, that familiar rumble of Harley engines cutting through the rain. A line of bikers roared up Main Street, headlights slicing the grey haze. Cooper led the charge, soaked to the bone, shouting orders. Caleb, cut the power line. Riggs, get her out of that house. They worked like a storm themselves, organized, fierce, efficient. Riggs, the ex-army medic, carried Mrs. Donnelly out in his arms just before the roof caved in. Another biker used his truck winch to pull the fallen tree aside. Tanya stood there in the rain, clutching her apron, tears mixing with the downpour. The sheriff's pickup arrived just as the bikers were finishing. He stared at the scene for a long moment, fire sparks dying out, bikers standing in the mud, and an old woman safe in a blanket. He tipped his hat. Didn't even need to call us, her? Cooper just shrugged. We were closer. The sheriff smirked. Guess I'll put that in the report then. Hell's Angels beat us to the punch. By sunset, the storm had passed. Power lines lay twisted, trees scattered, but the town was intact. Everywhere Tanya looked, bikers were helping, handing out food, clearing debris, checking on the elderly. That night, the diner became the shelter. Its neon sign flickered faintly as families huddled inside, sipping soup Tanya had made from scratch. The smell of coffee mixed with the sound of laughter and gratitude. Cooper sat by the counter, arms crossed, rain dripping from his vest. Told you we'd stick around, he said quietly. Tanya smiled. You did. And you kept your word. Outside, the storm faded into silence. Inside, something stronger took its place, a bond no weather could wash away. The morning after the storm, the sky was a clear, endless blue, the kind of calm that feels like a reward. Tanya stood outside the diner, watching as the Iron Shields loaded their tools and blankets back onto their bikes. The whole town had come to see them off. Children waved hand-drawn signs that read, "Thank you, Angels on Wheels." Mrs. Donnelly, her arm in a sling but smiling, handed Cooper a small box of cookies. You boys ride safe now, she said. And don't you forget this old town when you hit the highway. Cooper gave her a two-finger salute. You're on our map forever. He turned to Tanya last. You started all this, he said. One moment of kindness. You didn't think it mattered, but it did. Tanya's eyes glistened. You didn't have to come back. He smiled, soft but proud. When someone fills your tank on a dry road, you don't just drive off and forget. You make sure the road gives back. The engines started, one after another, until the air hummed with the sound of loyalty. They rode off down Highway 16, sunlight flashing off chrome, leaving behind not a gang, but a legend. Tanya watched until the last rider disappeared over the horizon. Then she whispered to herself, sometimes angels don't have wings, they ride Harleys. Kindness doesn't need an audience or a reason, it just needs to be given. What Tanya offered in a moment of compassion rippled through her town like sunlight after a storm. In a world quick to judge and slow to help, her small gesture proved something powerful. Goodness, once set in motion, never stops, it rides from one heart to another. And sometimes, the loudest engines carry the quietest lessons about grace, courage, and humanity.